Good to see you too, both of you.
Yeah, yeah. I almost feel like I'm out of the lockdown already.
I know.
Almost, almost.
Yeah. So, by the way, Ida's got a wonderful visual podcast you should all check out. It's called Truth Serum, okay? And you shouldn't be surprised by that title, knowing Ida. So it's a visual podcast. It's on YouTube and Facebook. Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern, okay? Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern. So check that out. All right, and we'll talk more about some of our other projects coming up later today as well. We got a big show ahead for you guys. We have lots of really interesting video that we want to share with you. Some updates, obviously, on the George Floyd story, updates on Donald Trump's insanity, as usual. We have all of that. Before we do anything else, we're almost out of time here. We've only got a couple of days in May. We were trying to get to 200,000 in audience funding to keep Young Turks alive, sustainable, healthy, strong, and all of those things. So can I see the thermometer? And by the way, of course, if you want to donate, we would love it. Make sure you take care of yourself and your family and friends first. But if you can, tyt.com/go. Okay, tyt.com/go. And we'll show you that in a minute. By the way, at the beginning of next week, I have a fun announcement. It's not that dramatic, and it's definitely not important, but it's fun. So I've got a fun announcement at the beginning of next week. And in fact, I'm going to announce it on my Facebook page later tonight. So after the show, if you go on Cenk Uygur Official, you'll see my announcement. That's fun. All right, now let's look at the thermometer real quick. All of a sudden, we're in the ball game. It's not impossible anymore. 183,135. Can I see 185? Can I see 185? I love you guys. All right, let's get started. Anna, you're up.
After the third night of protests in Minneapolis and across the country, the cop who murdered George Floyd has finally been taken into custody. Investigation was ongoing regarding the three other officers. And I want to make clear that the protesters not only demanded that Chauvin be taken into custody and charged criminally for what happened to Floyd, but they also want the three other officers who have lost their jobs to also face a criminal investigation and criminal charges. Now, with that said, there's been more and more footage, surveillance released showing what the scene looked like. And for the first time, we get a better look at what the other three officers were doing during the time that Floyd was being suffocated to death by Chauvin. So we're about to show you a video that's difficult to watch. As we all know, this was a horrific act, and this video is no exception. But with that warning, here's what I was talking about.
My face is gone. I can't breathe, man. Please. Please let me stand. Please, man, I can't breathe.
So the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, vowed swift justice for the officers involved in Floyd's killing. Again, I want to emphasize that the three others have not been, held in custody. They have not been formally charged with anything. He also pleaded for an end to the violence and noted the difficulty in requiring the same institution that sparked the unrest to restore order. But he said the underlying issues involved in George Floyd's death could not be addressed until the literal fires are extinguished. Of course, he's referencing what the protests have been like, which we'll give you more details about later in the show.
Yeah, so this is exactly what I'm talking about. They keep saying, oh, well, this is an illegal maneuver and it's not sanctioned by the police. And they're trying to make it out like, oh, this is such an aberration. It's not at all an aberration. It happens all the time. Eric Garner said he couldn't breathe, and they choked him to death anyway. It turns out it's not just Chauvin who's got his knee on him. It's two other cops, too. And none of them let him up. None of them stopped when he had passed out. And so I think this disingenuous acting as if Chauvin is like the one bad apple, it's driving me nuts. It's total BS. It's not about a bad apple. It's what they do all the time. They're taught to use excessive force, and they're taught to let cops get away with it. I mean, Chauvin had 18 complaints against him, And they didn't do anything about 16 of them. Apparently there was discipline about 2 of them. Not discipline enough for him to not kill a black man in the street while he was being taped. He's so callous. All 3 of the cops, they know they're being taped, and they still won't get off of him after he passes out for another 3-4 minutes. So don't tell me it's an aberration. This is what African Americans have been dealing with for centuries in this country, and it's gaslighting to pretend that this is a one-off. Oh, we're gonna have to do something about this one officer.
Yeah, when you think about Oscar Grant in 2009 at the Fruitvale station, who was also handcuffed on his stomach and shot in the back, and you think about McDuffie, who was on a motorcycle and shot in the back, and you think about Neville Johnson, where I'm from in Miami, my neighborhood was up in flames. When people talk about this, the civil unrest, I think that's the only thing that these people respond to. But I agree with you, Cenk. I am tired of the rhetoric of people being all of a sudden shocked to see a Black person being murdered when historically it has been part of the history of the United States. And one thing I will say, because you know that I am a disruptor and I come with the truth of my truth, to see an Asian man standing there and not do anything in light of the being in the middle of a pandemic, when Asian people were asking Black people and white people to really stand in the gap for them because they were being discriminated against, when Donald Trump called the coronavirus the Chinese virus, and people were appalled at the mistreatment of Asian Americans. It really sends a message, and it really pained me to see a Filipino man stand there knowing the discrimination that Asian people also receive in this country, and not to even extend just an olive branch, just to say, hey man, don't kill them, don't anything. And there was nothing. I just think that's a serious, one of our serious problems is that we lack solidarity. And as marginalized communities, we have to take note of our behavior and us being complicit in the oppression of other people of color.
Well, let me add one quick thing to that, which is that, look, sometimes when the fires start, it is Asian establishments or Middle Eastern establishments that are burned down or vandalized or looted, right? And then people get really upset in those communities. But were you guys at the Black Lives Matter protests?
Yeah.
Did you show up in solidarity? So, and I'm not trying to pick on those folks. I'm Middle Eastern. My wife is Asian. I'm just saying we got to stick together, all of us. And so don't tell me you're concerned about violence after you see some rioting or looting. You should have been concerned about the violence when it was happening to African American men and they were getting killed over and over and over again. So what that tells me is you're not concerned about the violence. And I'm not saying this to any particular ethnicity. I'm saying it to everybody in America. You are not concerned about the violence. You're only concerned when it might affect you.
Absolutely. And women too.
Yeah.
Breonna Taylor was also slaughtered, not just recently.
That's right.
Yeah, look, I just want to add that any effort to deflect or distract from the real conversation that needs to be had by focusing on property damage, I'm not interested in entertaining it. I'm not going to indulge it. I think that it's purposely intended to delegitimize a very valid concern that the African American community has had in this country for a long, long time. And what we should really be asking ourselves is, what happened to lead to what we're experiencing today? I mean, when you create a system that makes people feel as though they have nothing left to lose, what do you expect? When someone like Colin Kaepernick gets the type of reaction he did for peacefully protesting, for kneeling during NFL games, and he gets the kind of treatment he did, he loses his professional football career as a result. The president of the United States refers to him as a son of a bitch, okay, for that peaceful protest. So you can't protest peacefully without the criticism. You can't protest the way that people have been across the country lately. There is no accurate way to protest for these people. The critics, they don't want the conversation to be had. They want the country to be complicit in the state-sponsored violence that poor, impoverished communities have been facing, that minority communities have been facing. They hate the fact that we're finally having a genuine debate about this, and we're demanding that something actually be done, right? So I'm not interested in having a discussion about property damage right now, because property can be rebuilt. Property can be saved. But human lives, once they're gone, they're gone. George Floyd is never coming back again. His daughter will never see him again. Okay, that is irreparable harm, and we're having a discussion about someone losing their life. There's no way to fix that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm just going to say one quick thing here. It's not to equate what happens to progressives to African Americans, because African Americans have gone through a nightmare in this country for so long. But all I'm saying is I can relate because African Americans are treated as invisible until all of a sudden something's burning. Then all of a sudden they're relevant, right? But before there was progressives treated as invisible. Don't care. The media won't cover you. You break a story. It doesn't matter. They'll treat you with a total double standard. And then the reason I say this is because, Anna, what you said evoked that in me. It's progressives shouldn't do primaries. Oh, it's in the general election. Now progressives can't do anything in the general election because you're up against the boogeyman, right? So, okay, but you can't fight back aggressively, but if you fight back quietly, nobody covers you. So there's no winning. There's no winning. But same thing times 1,000 for African Americans. It doesn't matter what you do. You just, no, that's illegitimate. This is illegitimate. Everything is illegitimate. So just sit there and get killed. And so now they're tired of sitting there and getting killed. They've been tired all this time. But when it's shown this way, as I said yesterday, violence is politics of last resort, because it's not something that's planned. It's not something that's conscious. Not something that anybody wants. It organically happens when people feel like they have no outlet at all. And that's what the situation here is.
I just want to quickly say this, because I think that it's very hypocritical. America and its beautiful capitalism, when you care more about a target than you do about a man being suffocated to death with a knee on his neck. But when you don't you come at me with that looting stuff. When you talk about, I write them down all the time, every time I think of another one. The Boston Tea Party, Bastille, Stonewall, the Berlin Wall. Rioting is the language of the change, right? When we talk about the American government, and when we talk about America, looting is not American. Well, it's very American when you're looting in Nicaragua, and you're looting in Iran and Iraq, and you're looting in Palestine, and you're looting in Black Wall Street, and you're looting Native American land. That looting is acceptable. But when the people finally say no more, and they rise and they start destroying what you care about, which is capitalism, now you want to hurt and now you want to bleed. But you can't shed a tear to watch a man with a knee in his neck for 9 minutes. So you know what? Let it burn. Let it burn. I said it.
Okay, so I want to add one quick thing to that. Ida, I'd never thought about it in terms of the Boston Tea Party. You're 100% right. That's what is that? That's looting. It's like the definition of looting. And so we're so proud of that. When the French do it, we do plays about it. Les Miserables. Isn't that amazing how they burn things to the ground, right? When black folks do it, all of a sudden it's the most outrageous, horrible thing you've ever seen. But I also wanted to add one more to your list. The Koch brothers started their fortune by looting Native American oil. And the government even caught them, and they were busted on it. And then that's when they figured out, oh, we can legally bribe politicians. And they started bribing politicians and giving them campaign donations. One of the first politicians they ever did that to was Bob Dole of Kansas. And they wholesale bought the Republican Party because they realized they got caught stealing oil from Native Americans. So are the Koch brothers ever called looters? No, because they loot on a mass scale. When they do it, it's millions upon millions of dollars. So the double standard is maddening. And unfortunately, a lot of the media goes along with that gaslighting. And so if out of this whole segment, will they take away, hey, man, they made a good point about the Boston Tea Party. They made a good point about African-American experience. No, if anyone covers this segment, I guarantee you, they'll focus on Ida talking about burn it down, right? They're like, how dare you? You can't say that. That could affect white people. You can't say that. But if it affects black people, hey, whatever, man. There's nothing we can do about it. We have been principled and right on this all throughout. We were against violence when it happened to African Americans, and we were outraged by it. We've been outraged against violence in every single situation, including this. So, but if you weren't outraged and you were part of the racists who celebrated Kaepernick not being in the league, etc., don't come talking to me about violence.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, look, if people are really that concerned about property damage, I can show you tons of images of massive cities throughout the world that have been basically destroyed to rubble because of our state-sponsored terrorism abroad. You know, the actions that we're taking in Yemen right now, we're assisting Saudi Arabia in a genocide. All you Trump supporters who come at me regarding the Armenian genocide, you care about the genocide that's happening right now with Trump's little buddy in Saudi Arabia? I mean, they're insincere, disingenuous, and they love violence. They love violence. I don't buy for a second that the people who are accusing the protesters of violence right now actually have a real problem with violence. They have a problem with the individuals who are standing up for themselves. They have a problem with the message they're trying to send. And at the end of the day, that's all it's about. So that's the reason why I have no interest in indulging their nonsense talking points. It's the same thing over and over again. They're the same people who sit back and watch our own children die in these mass shootings and do nothing about it. They support that kind of violence day in and day out. All right. So let's talk a little bit about who Chauvin was, because we're learning more about him. Chauvin worked as a security guard at a nightclub in Minnesota, and we're actually learning that the victim in this case, George Floyd, also worked as a security guard. Recently, the press spoke to the owner of the nightclub, and we've learned a little more about who Chauvin is, but more importantly, what the police officers in the area are like when they work as security guards at her nightclub. Take a look.
Noticed that he got very anxious when there was an urban night where there were a lot of African-American people, as did many other officers. He was certainly not the only one.
What did he do? How did he act?
Well, really, it's systemic, because it started all the way from licensing and went through the third precinct, and then was an expression of also how the officers reacted when they were there. I would just kind of characterize it as skittish. So they would get very nervous very quickly and want to pull out the pepper spray with any little thing that might happen. And they certainly acted very kind of group mentality. They always had to call backup if a little tiny thing happened. So it was different than what we saw in our Latin nights.
I mean, I'm not surprised, but I'm glad that we have more people coming out and talking about who this cop was as a person.
Yeah. I mean, look, we've been saying it for 2 days. This guy had 18 complaints against him. So it's the system that knows who he is. Was he taken off the street? Nope. I don't. That is in essence the system saying we don't have a problem with a guy who gets 18 complaints. And it's not just about him. That sends a message to all the other cops. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We'll get your back. You do anything you like to those people because they don't matter. And so is anyone on planet Earth that's being honest surprised that the cops are more hostile and on guard when they're dealing with African Americans in any context? Look, I don't even think the right wing would pretend that isn't the case. I think the right wing would just say, yeah, but they had it coming because, black people are violent. And so that's why cops are naturally more likely to be on guard with them, et cetera. They don't realize that they're owning up to their racism, but that no one thinks, oh, yeah, cops, they are white, black, Latino. They can't tell the difference at all. Look, some now, including and it maybe especially on the left, think, bad guys go into this profession in the first place. I remember having arguments with Jimmy Dore about this. And I don't know the psychology of that, and I don't care, and I don't think overall, even if that were true, that would be a minor point. The major point is, what does the system encourage and incentivize? And what does it discourage and disincentivize? So when it says to cops, you can do anything you want to minorities and always get away with it, and hey, be on guard for these type of people, it encourages this. So don't pretend that you're surprised when you see that George Floyd video, because that's the system we built. It was built to do just that. It's not the bug, it's the feature.
It's so much embedded in the DNA of this country that a woman at Central Park can say, I'm going to call the police and tell them that an African American is harassing me. It's so much part of the DNA of the country that a white woman will fake crying to the cops because she knows that she can weaponize the police against Black people and it will probably result in violence. That is how how common it is. We see the barbecue Beckys and we see the Central Park Sarahs and we got a long list of them now, but it's because even they know that the police will come faster when it comes to Black people. They will probably be more violent and more aggressive. The other thing that I wanted to address is about when they say that Black people are violent or that Latinos are violent and marginalized people are violent. Isn't it ironic that the most violent people on the planet, the ones that went over to Africa and kidnapped people, enslaved them for 400 years, built their country on free labor on the backs of these people, the people that go and who raped and pillaged the First Nations people of this country, the people who go abroad and terrorize, as Ana said earlier, that it's happening in the Middle East, it's happened throughout Central America, have the audacity and the gall to classify a group of people who have been subject to their reign their whole lives as violent. I find that a little bit odd.
Look, the United States just orchestrated a coup in Bolivia to overthrow a leftist leader, and the images of violence by the now right-wing government there, the right-wing government that the United States supports, is just, it makes your stomach churn. It's disgusting. We support all sorts of violence around the world and in our own country on a regular basis. I'm not bringing this up to justify violence. I'm bringing it up to make a point about how the very people who claim they're against violence when it comes to these protesters are the biggest supporters of violence when it comes to financial interests, corporate interests, business interests here in the United States, or when it comes to the gun lobby. Because really, when they get to choose between lessening violence in this country by passing common sense gun control laws, just a damn background check when it comes to gun sales between private sellers and these, gun shows, they won't do it. They choose violence over lessening the amount of mass shootings in this country all the time. So I don't believe them. I don't believe that they don't like violence. I believe that they love violence, but they use these arguments to continue to oppress groups in this country that have historically been oppressed. That's what this is about.
If you think about those protesters in Michigan who had their guns on their hip, screaming in the face of police officers who got to go home that day. You think about all the babies that were murdered in Connecticut, and you think about Dylan Roof getting bought a Whopper and was treated with grace and decency after murdering 9 Black people who were in church. So I don't want to hear all of that. And you know what's funny? We have these conversations, and these politicians, who the Republicans and Democrats alike, they politicize these events. They pretend Democrats, we historically have been on the side of civil rights, yet nothing has changed in the communities of Black and brown people since the beginning of time. It doesn't matter who's been in office. So we can sit here and have these fake conversations about how it's going to get better because Donald Trump is out of office. Donald Trump is just a symptom of the bigger disease. And as idiotic as he is, Mitch McConnell is more dangerous than him because he has half a brain. So let's not try to play the game like these political parties have not been benefiting from the multiple deaths, unnecessary deaths of Black and brown people. It is time for us to have a real change in this country. And if I don't advocate for violence, and I don't get anything out of white people being hurt. I cried for those babies and those high schoolers, just like I cry for everybody else, because I believe in the value of all human lives. But I will not stand next to anybody who thinks that a brown or a Black life is less than a white life. And it is only valuable when your neighborhood is shaken.
So real quick, two things to add to what you guys said. One is, look, there's a lot of things that I love about this country. We moved to this country. At the same time, if you're being honest about how we came to be a country, of course we were born of violence. Slavery is the most violent thing you can imagine. And now the right wing claims, oh, we're all about liberty and our history and tradition is about liberty. Well, some of it is, and the other half is the exact opposite. It is the most violent, bloody thing you could possibly imagine. And what's manifest destiny? God says we should come and take your stuff and kill you along the way. I mean, to say that the country did not arise out of violence is insanity. Of course it did. And to Ida's point about the Michigan protesters, somebody did a side-by-side on social media of what Trump said about them versus the protesters in Minneapolis. The white guys that came with assault rifles and threatened legislators and cops, etc., he called them very good people. For the protesters in Minneapolis, he called them thugs.
Of course he did.
So that's Donald Trump for you.
When we come back from the break, we'll give you the entirety of that statement, which was eventually flagged by Twitter. And later in the show, we'll give you other angles to this story, including a story involving a Black CNN reporter getting arrested for doing absolutely nothing wrong while reporting on the protests in Minneapolis. Come right back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Want to tell you that we got Shop TYT stuff going on as well. Check it out. All of our shirts. We got a new summer shirt there. We got the Great Indoors shirt there. And the one I'm wearing, if you go to a lunch, oh, look at that. The Great Indoors. And then you got the Light in the Darkness Batman shirt going on there. I'm wearing my, if you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing shirt on. I love this one. Everybody loves this. Okay. So check that out at shoptyt.com. Let me take a quick look at the thermometer here at tyt.com/go. We're trying to get to 200. I don't know if we could do it by the end of the weekend, but we're at 184,679 now. 185 would be amazing, guys. Thank you for participating. I'm going to read just a couple here. There's 1,000 that say how much they love Aida Rodriguez. But one from the members section, Tattered Remnant says, if a getaway driver is guilty, then the cops sure should be also. And if there were good cops, they would be outing the bad ones. Since they don't, it's obvious there aren't. So that's a really great point. It's called felony murder. If you're involved in the case at all, you could be charged, whether you're a getaway driver or anything like that. So if Chauvin is charged with murder, why aren't the other cops charged? They would be if they weren't cops. Then D. Uchenna in YouTube Super Chat says, thank you for keeping Breonna Taylor in this conversation, Ida. I love you. You're an amazing human, and I love that your voice is unfettered. I'm only reading one of 1,000 of those comments. And the last one is Crystal Flores with another great point, also using YouTube Super Chat. She says, I'm an ICU registered nurse. I'm mad that the medic checked George's carotid pulse while the officer was still holding pressure on his neck. They all failed him. That's also a great point. No one had the courage to say, hey, I'm checking for a pulse to see if he's dead, so can you please get off his neck? Why? Because the cops rule the roost. Everybody knows it, and you're not allowed to question them as they're murdering someone. All right, let's get back to the news.
All right. Well, on the third night of nationwide protests in response to police brutality and the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Donald Trump decided to do what he does best, add fuel to the fire by inciting violence. In a tweet, he wrote, "These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen. Just spoke to Governor Tim Walz and told him that the military is with him and all the way. Any difficulty and we will assume control, but when looting starts, the shooting starts." So that last line was a reference to something that happened in this country's history. It was a reference to a Miami police chief in 1967 who was incredibly brutal to the Black community and had absolutely no problem whatsoever in using excessive force in order to brutalize them. And so Twitter apparently did something about this, which honestly, after Trump had his childish little meltdown about being fact-checked on Twitter, I didn't know if Twitter would ever flag anything that he does or fact-check anything that he does, but they did include a flag saying that this tweet violated the Twitter rules about glorifying violence. However, Twitter has determined that it may be in the public's interest for the tweet to remain accessible. So the tweet is still up, but it has that note indicating that it's glorifying violence. So when Trump realized that he had been flagged, he went ahead and used the official White House Twitter account to tweet the same thing, but later that was flagged as well.
You know, it's funny. I tweeted that Donald Trump had a thigh gap that didn't have a thigh gap, and they flagged my tweet for saying it violated the standards, and they took it down. And then they warned me that my account could be suspended because enough people reported it. And so it's interesting to me that he can incite violence, which he does with frequency. Now, let's not act, because the thing about Donald Trump is now he has made it abundantly clear where he stands, right? Mexican immigrants are rapists, the looters are thugs. And let's not forget that one of those thugs that was looting, whose name they said is Tom Peterson from one of the articles that I read, was a cop. So when we talk about these people who were looting, there were a lot of white people out there. There was a white woman that was pretending, that was in a wheelchair. She was stabbing Black people, and they finally they had to put an extinguisher on her. She stood up. She was stabbing people with a knife. Like his language is cold. It's direct. He is directly speaking to his fellow white supremacists when he uses that language. He is not in all thinking about Minneapolis. He's not thinking about the country. He is thinking about his base that he expects to stick with him in November, because now he has messed up so much that even the people who were supporting him are embarrassed to be affiliated with him, because he's such a messed up PR job. He is just a walking chaos and nonsense and foolishness, from injecting yourself with bleach or whatever it is. Anyone who says that they're a decent human being or has any level of intelligence has to distance themselves. So what is he doing? He is going straight for the people that he thinks are going to rock with him in November, because he knows that anybody who has any shame, dignity, or sense cannot possibly stand behind that.
Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about where the quote comes from. It's from Walter Headley. He was considered a so-called tough cop back in 1967. Now, if that was in the middle of the civil rights era, so if you're considered a tough cop, that meant you did tremendous police brutality against African Americans. In fact, Headley also said, quote, "We don't mind being accused of police brutality." So he celebrated it. Now, Trump is too ignorant to know any history, even one that is as close a kindred spirit as Walter Headley. So, and the quote is identical. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. So the
Can I read the entirety of the quote for the audience, because I think it is important to show how it's the exact same thing that Trump said. So this is from Walter Headley. Again, he's the Miami police chief in 1967. He says, "We haven't had any serious problems with civil uprising and looting because I've let the word filter down that when the looting starts, the shooting starts. We don't mind being accused of police brutality. They haven't seen anything yet." And by the way, he was notable in the 1960s for using shotguns, dogs, and heavy-handed stop and frisk policy in order to fight crime in Black neighborhoods. In other words, brutalize Black Americans in the 1960s.
They also used dogs against African Americans during the slave patrol days. They had the same badges as cops do now. That's also where the Second Amendment comes from, to protect the ability of the slave patrol to carry weapons as they were chasing Black men down and preventing their liberty and killing them and lynching them, and the list goes on. So dogs, shotguns, and by the way, stop and frisk goes all the way through to Mike Bloomberg in New York, and who, by the way, has proudly endorsed Joe Biden. And this is what drives me crazy about the media. We call out Donald Trump more than anyone does, but we also call out Democrats when they're wrong. The media, on the other hand, as soon as Bloomberg was out of the race and endorsed Biden, oh, Bloomberg's fine, no problem at all, nothing to see here, let's all move on. I wonder if he also used dogs on African Americans, they would be okay with it. Probably they would, because he's a billionaire. Anyway, back to Headley. That direct quote, somebody must have told Trump. Now, granted here, we're very careful when we tell you things we know and that are facts. Here in this case, I don't know that. But my guess, given that it's the exact same quote, is somebody in the White House said, oh, this will be a good thing to tell the president because it'll be a dog whistle to all the racists who love it when we do police brutality against Black people. They gave it to him. He used it. So, gee, I wonder where they're coming from. Can't quite tell. And then I was on a podcast, Anna, on Wednesday with Politicon. I was on with Joel Pollak from Breitbart. And he said, oh, my God, I can't believe anybody would call Donald Trump a racist. Oh, come on, man. They are so... No. He's like, can you name one racist thing he's done? I mean, they say it with
I'd love to do that. His presidency began with a group of white supremacists and neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville, Virginia, chanting, "The Jews will not replace us." He referred to them as fine people, and he never once referred to the disgusting neckbeard white supremacist who ran over Heather Heyer and murdered her because she was counter-protesting that hatred in Charlottesville. Didn't call them a thug, didn't call him a thug, and referred to them as very fine people. That's just one example. Maybe another example, there was a mass shooting inspired by Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric in El Paso. He had nothing to say about that in regard to how he and his rhetoric influenced the type of behavior that we saw, the mass murder that we saw in El Paso. That's another example. I mean, I can give you more. He had nothing to say about the thug, Cesar Sayoc, who was sending those bombs to political opponents, to Democrats, to members of the media. Look, the number one criminal in our country is the president of the United States. He is 100% in favor of not just racism, but of murder, of violence. He has defended white supremacy in this country over and over again. And to be quite honest with you, I'm really tired of having the same ridiculous debate about whether or not Donald Trump's racist, right? So any media outlet, any podcast, any type of news source that even asks that question, the hosts are morons. You apparently don't know. You've been sleeping and you're completely unaware because you're rehashing the same debate that does not need to be debated. Donald Trump is a racist. So now what you need to ask is what this country is going to do about it, period. I'm so tired of having the same conversation like, oh, but is Trump really racist? Yes, he's racist. He's racist. Are we not bored with that same discussion over and over and over again? These lazy ass hosts who don't want to do any type of critical thinking or focus on any type of strategy or important issue. And instead, they ask the same question incessantly. Do your jobs. do your jobs. I don't care what Pollock has to say. He's a hack and he's an absolute clown and he's not a credible person to have any type of debate or conversation with.
And let's not forget that he tried to bring back the death penalty for the Central Park Five. Like, he has a history,
Exactly.
His family and their real estate history in New York with regards to Black people and poor people. So I don't understand where, I'm with you on that. I mean, we can go on and on and on. The illegal immigrant, the immigrants that come here are rapists and murderers. Like, I mean, the shithole countries. Like, and I'm not trying to curse. I'm quoting the President of the United States of America.
Yeah.
We got to take a break. Sorry, guys. We got to go. We got to take one more break. Finish that thought when we come right back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Progressive Pirate writes in the member section, cough, cough, Stephen Miller, cough, cough. I didn't say it. Okay, tyt.com/join to become a member. I'm pretty sure he's referring to the person who might have wrote the quote about when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Chris says, I donated after hearing Ana on the damage report. Progressive media is too important not to support. Love that, Chris. Really appreciate it. He's, of course, referring to tyt.com/go. That's our audience fundraising campaign so that we could press on and stay sustainable. Let's take a quick look at the thermometer there and see where we are. Here we go. 185,466. You guys are amazing. We're trying to get to 200. We only have a couple of days left by the end of the month. If you can chip in, any amount helps. You guys are wonderful. Another 1,000 comments saying how much they love Aida and Ana. In fact, Lee Smith on Twitter said, it's fire on TYT when Cenk is the quiet one. And finally, Fraser John using YouTube Super Chat said, Ana for president. That's all.
I'll vote for her.
Thank you. I'm just so tired of people trying to pass themselves off as journalists while they ask the same tired question over and over again because they don't have brains and they can't think for themselves. Is Donald Trump, is he racist? Wow, great journalism there. Congratulations. It's been 3.5 years. You haven't figured it out yet? Anyway, are we ready to move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
That is an American television reporter, Omar Jimenez, being led away by police officers. He clearly identified himself as a reporter.
That's right. A Black and Latino CNN reporter was arrested while he was simply doing his job. It happened live on television. And this is the type of First Amendment freedom of press violation, constitutional violation that should outrage every single American in this country. And if you want to see what this scene looked like, and whether or not there was any justification for the Minnesota State Troopers to arrest Omar Jimenez and his crew, let's take a look at the context.
Wherever you'd want us, we will go. We were just getting out of your way when you were advancing through the intersection. So just let us know and we got you. And this is a scene here playing out in Minneapolis. This is part of the advanced police presence that we saw come over the course of really minutes when the local police showed up at the fire department, or with the fire department, I should say, on that building we showed you that was burning. This is among the State Patrol unit that was advancing up the street saying and scattering the protesters at that point for people to clear the area. And so we walked away. I'm sorry? You're under arrest. Okay. Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir?
So there he is getting arrested. That was the first part of the video. And it was obvious that he is a CNN reporter. He had a CNN badge that was clearly visible. He was in the middle of a live hit. It was clear that he was a journalist, someone who was also complying with what the state troopers want. And they decided to arrest him anyway. Guys, I just want to go to this final video and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Why am I under arrest, sir?
Officer is with CNN and he's on the air right now.
Okay.
You are arresting him live on CNN. We told you before that we are with CNN.
If you're just tuning in, you are watching our correspondent, Omar Jimenez, being arrested by state police in Minnesota. We're not sure why our correspondent is being arrested.
Hang on 1 second, Allison. Let's listen into what these officers are saying. That is an American television reporter, Omar Jimenez, being led away by police officers. He clearly identified himself as a reporter.
So that's what the scene was like. He was shortly after that was released, but I do want to note that he wasn't the only person who was arrested. Members of his crew were also arrested, and later they were let go. And the response that we've gotten from the Minnesota State Troopers is, in the course of clearing the streets and restoring order at Lake Street and Snelling Avenue, 4 people were arrested by State Patrol troopers, including 3 members of a CNN crew. The 3 were released once they were confirmed to be members of the media. But he was wearing a badge that was clearly visible. You see it hanging from his pants. And he was in the middle of a live hit as he was being arrested. So no one's buying that argument at all.
No, here's what they actually meant. They were released as soon as we figured out that it was CNN. It's not like they didn't know he was media. There was a giant camera pointed at him. It wasn't a cell phone. It was a big TV camera. And by the way, if it was a cell phone, that's still 100% acceptable. So basically they were saying we were arresting all the media. We just didn't know that they were part of the powerful media. It's unbelievable. Jeff Zucker had Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, on to discuss this apparently minutes after the arrest. We had a reporter and a cameraman arrested in St. Louis 3 years ago covering protests, incredibly similar situation. They've got a TYT flag on their mic. They've got press credentials. They show it to the cops. The reporter is white. The cameraman's black. Boom, arrested. No one cares. By the way, CNN didn't stick up for us. None of the major media stuck up for us. But all of a sudden, when it happens to CNN, everybody's outraged. And by the way, they should be outraged. But they should be outraged when it happens to all media. And CNN had a reporter a block down the street who was white. So people constantly trying to avoid the very, very obvious. Now, for those of the right-wingers who are going to say, like, oh, you think they're going to do that live on camera because they actually want to do it race? Well, they did do it live on camera. That shows how brazen they are. And it doesn't mean that they had to have a committee meeting and a memo ahead of time saying arrest only the black reporters. What we're trying to tell you guys is it's the assumptions, the stereotypes, and the discrimination that's built into the system and into those cops' heads. Because when they see a white reporter and he says, I'm from CNN, they go, oh, he must be from CNN, and they don't arrest him. When they see a black reporter from CNN, they go, yeah, right, yeah, sure you're from CNN, arrest him, and they lead him away.
In fact, let me just read the last comment in the story here, because there was a white CNN reporter there. CNN's Josh Campbell, who also was in the area but not standing with the on-air crew, said he too was approached by police but was allowed to remain. He was quoted as saying, "I identified myself. They said, okay, you're permitted to be in the area," recounted Campbell, who is white. "I was treated much differently than Jimenez was." Ida, go ahead.
So yeah, that's what I was going to say. There was another white reporter in the vicinity who wasn't treated that way. But this is why I have such an emergency call to action when it comes to Latinos who don't think that this could happen to them. This is an Afro-Latino. And yes, when they see you, they see a Black person. They don't care if your last name is Jimenez and you speak Spanish. But the other thing that I want to say is that the trying to shut down, first of all, the race soldiers that have infiltrated law enforcement, who are part of these white supremacist groups, they really think that they are beyond the law. When someone says you think they would do that on camera, yes, they kill somebody on camera. Why wouldn't they arrest a Black person on camera if they murdered a Black person on camera and thought that they were going to be okay with it? And the other thing is, for all these people who are always talking about the Constitution and the Patriots, that scene looks like the scene from a third world country or a communist country where the press does not have the right to speak up. You should be weary. You should be concerned that in the middle of a civil unrest, they are arresting members of your media after the president is reciting the language of dictators. We should be this is a state of emergency right now. And I don't understand why people don't realize the sense of urgency of what is happening in this country right now.
So take us out of it, even though it literally happened to us. Say it's democracy now. You know what? They would have arrested the Black reporter and no one would have cared. They would have gotten away with it. And so the only reason they didn't get away with it was because it was a major cable news outlet. Every other media would have been arrested, and that's why they did it. They did it because they know 99% of the time they're going to get away with it, and the rest of the media isn't going to stick up for them. That's what's going to happen. I mean, unless it's
you're absolutely right. Amy Goodman has been arrested for covering protests.
And no one stuck up for her other than us.
Yep, exactly right. All right, we are going to have an awesome post-game show today. Become a member. Go to tyt.com/join. Members help keep us sustainable, and we definitely need your help, especially in these trying times. Everyone else, have an awesome weekend. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.